Hello, my friends. I decided to write this story because I need your help. I got into a relationship with my son's friend, and I don't know what to do. To understand better, watch until the end, and already subscribe to the channel to support the channel. It was a cold fall night in Chicago. I could hear the wind outside, rustling the dry leaves that piled up on the sidewalks. The city, always lively and noisy, was quieter than usual that late afternoon. The streets, usually saturated with cars, were moving more calmly, perhaps due to the weather. The sky, already darkening, looked like a canvas painted in gray and orange, while the lights from the buildings reflected in the window of my apartment, which was on the 13th floor of a modern glass-walled building overlooking the Chicago River. It was my refuge, my space. Loneliness and I got along very well. Since my divorce from Kevin almost 3 years ago, I had gotten used to life without much change. Work, home, routine. When Nathan, my 22-year-old son, went back to college, my house became even emptier. He still came to visit me on vacations or during the weekends, but with university life, meetings started to become more spaced out. I, on the other hand, plunged headlong into my work. I'm a business consultant, specializing in strategies for small and medium-sized companies, and most of my work was done over the phone. What, at the start of my career, seemed like a difficult task, over time became a well-adjusted system. I dealt with virtual meetings and negotiations, always with a calm and assured tone of voice, showing professionalism. But in my spare time, when I wasn't involved in contracts or reports, all I had left was the silence of my empty apartment. At that moment, I was sitting in my leather armchair, laptop open on my lap, reviewing emails, and trying to find solutions to a crisis my latest client was facing. I was honestly exhausted, not from the work itself, but from the feeling that my life had become an endless sequence of tasks and obligations. I wanted more than that, but I didn't know exactly what. That's when the sound of my cell phone broke the stillness. I looked at the screen. It was Nathan. "Hi, Mom." His voice was full of energy, as always. He had this way of speaking that made me smile without meaning to. "Dylan and I are coming over later, okay? We just wanted to spend some time with you. It's been so long since we've seen each other, hasn't it?" Dylan, I thought, frowning. I knew the name, of course, but he was just Nathan's friend. Nathan and Dylan had met at university, shared courses and common friends, but he never told me much about himself. I knew he was a good kid. Nathan always said Dylan was smart, hardworking, and apparently very centered. At least he never mentioned anything that made me think he might be a bad influence. But at the same time, I didn't know what to expect from a 24-year-old boy, my son's friend, whom I barely knew. I was 40 years old, and frankly, I was more used to dealing with executives than young university students. I swallowed what was left of my coffee, which was already getting cold, and looked around the apartment. It was impeccably tidy, as always. Dark wooden floors, white walls, and the modern touch of minimalist decor. The furniture was simple, but expensive. It was a space that reflected the style of my life. Solitary, but well-established. "Sure, Nathan. It'll be good to see you." I tried to keep my voice light, but something was bothering me. Maybe it was the fact that I felt so much older than before. Or maybe it was because the idea of having Dylan here, so close to me, gave me a strange feeling. After hanging up, I went to the bedroom and chose something simple to wear. I didn't want to look like I was trying to impress, but I didn't want to look sloppy either. I chose comfortable black pants, a burgundy silk blouse, and a discreet sweater. I knew that just being there would make a difference. When they arrived, I went to the door to greet them. Nathan entered first, with that open, warm smile. He was tall, with light brown hair and blue eyes, and his quiet manner always gave me a sense of peace. He went straight to hugging me, a tight hug full of affection. I always felt that he was my anchor, my greatest pride. Right behind him, Dylan entered. He looked a little taller than Nathan, with messy, dark brown hair, almost as if he had been running his hand through it the whole time. He had dark skin and an easy smile, which soon widened when he saw me. I didn't know what to expect, But as soon as our eyes met, I felt a little shiver. Something about his manner, his confidence, his posture. It was different. "Hi, Callie." Dylan greeted me in a friendly tone, holding out his hand. I gave it a firm shake, but at the same time I was a little hesitant, as if something was stopping me from simply acting naturally. He smiled again, and I felt a twinge of discomfort mixed with an inexplicable sense of attraction. "Hello, Dylan. Good to see you." I tried to smile back, even though I felt something bothering me. I didn't know what exactly, but something about the way he looked at me made me feel like I was being analyzed, in a much deeper way than I was used to. Nathan went straight to the sofa, as if he were in his own home. He threw himself down with the naturalness of someone who lives there and picked up the remote control, turning on the TV. "Shall we watch a movie?" he suggested, without taking his eyes off the screen. I stood still for a moment, looking at the two of them. Dylan was already settling into the armchair opposite me, and part of me felt the urge to talk to him more, to start a conversation, but I didn't know where to start. I ended up sitting at the dining table further away, still trying to make sense of the situation. It was clear that Nathan and Dylan were very comfortable. They had a solid friendship, but what about me? I felt out of place. The silence between us was broken by Dylan. "So, Callie, Nathan always says you're a great businesswoman. He told me you have a business consultancy? It must be challenging to reconcile all this," he said, leaning forward slightly, his gaze fixed on me, interested. I smiled, surprised by the question, and for some strange reason, I felt the need to show him who I was. A capable woman who had worked hard to get where she was. I tried to keep my voice calm and assertive, but at the same time, the feeling of being watched made me a little uncomfortable. "Yes, I work as a consultant. I deal with a lot of clients, mainly small business owners. It's sometimes complicated, but I like what I do." I summed it up, trying to keep the conversation light. But Dylan didn't seem interested in just knowing about the job. He wanted more. He wanted to know more about me. There was something between the lines of his gaze, a curiosity that seemed to go beyond the professional. He seemed genuinely interested in every word I said, and that made my heart race a little. And that's when I realized something inside me was starting to change. Something I hadn't felt in years. Something that wasn't just admiration for Dylan's youth, but something deeper. Something that I didn't know if it was right or wrong, but that was certainly about to lead me down an uncertain path. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Dylan and I talked about various subjects, but always in a more personal tone, while Nathan was more focused on the movie. I was distant, but at the same time immersed in the small exchanges of glances with Dylan. He seemed to know exactly how to make me feel at ease, but at the same time, there was something that made me uneasy. Something I couldn't control. When they finally left, after a night of laughing and talking, I was alone again, but something inside me was different. I knew that visit had stirred something inside me, something I didn't know how to explain, but I felt it wouldn't be easy to ignore. I went to bed that night, still with the feeling of Dylan in my mind, a name that, until a few hours ago, had meant nothing. But now, it seemed to carry a weight that I didn't know how to bear. The week passed uneventfully, but I couldn't get Dylan out of my head. Every time he appeared, something in me seemed to light up. I didn't know if it was his youth, his carefree manner, or something deeper. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, the truth was that he was starting to occupy a space that I didn't know how to fill. It was a cold afternoon when he showed up again. Nathan had left to take care of some business at college, and I was alone, as usual. The sound of the doorbell snapped me out of my trance. As I opened the door, there stood Dylan, with that easy, familiar smile. "Hi, Callie," he said, his voice soft and almost inviting. "Nathan told me you were working. I thought I'd stop by and take a look." I smiled, a little surprised, but tried to hide my discomfort. He always seemed so at ease. "Sure, come in," I said, giving in. He didn't need permission to be there. He was becoming a constant presence. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. When we settled down on the sofa, the silence between us became heavier. Dylan, as always, was calm. I, on the other hand, felt a growing anxiety. He started chatting, asking about work, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "What about you, Dylan? How's college?" I asked, trying to take the focus off myself. "Oh, you know how it is, Callie. I feel a bit lost sometimes." He answered with a sincerity that surprised me. His eyes fixed on me, as if he expected something in return. There was something in that answer, a vulnerability that I hadn't expected from someone so confident. Dylan seemed to want to show more of himself, in an almost imperceptible way. He wasn't just asking questions, he was inviting me to look deeper. Sometimes I feel like that too, as if other people's expectations were stronger than my own. I said, more on impulse than because I wanted to share something personal. Dylan leaned forward a little, his gaze still fixed on me. The distance between us seemed to shrink, and the air became thick. He seemed so close, as if he wanted to understand not just what I was saying, but what I was feeling. "I think you understand what I'm saying, don't you?" he asked, his voice now almost a whisper. It was a simple question, but the answer was far from easy. I only knew that I was letting myself get carried away by something I couldn't control. He was my son's friend, but at that moment he seemed to be something more. I nodded, trying to look calm, but the truth was that my emotions were running wild. Dylan smiled, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. "Sometimes we just need to take a step out of our comfort zone," he said, getting up and walking over to the window. I stood there, trying to process everything that was happening. He had said more than words. He was provoking me in a subtle but intense way. I wanted to say something, but I ran out of words. That afternoon, like the others, ended with him leaving, but this time I knew that something had changed. I didn't know what, but the path between us seemed narrower, more dangerous, and somehow I was beginning to accept that. The next morning, the sun rose timidly, as if hesitating to break through the cloudy sky. The trees outside my apartment swayed gently in the cold wind, and I felt more distant from everything than ever. The conversation with Dylan was still fresh in my mind. I tried in every way to rationalize what was happening. I was beginning to feel trapped, as if something I didn't understand was taking shape. The worry that I was crossing a line that should never have been touched was constant. It was a Saturday, and I had no pressing appointments, which gave me some time to reflect. As I made breakfast, my hands mechanically stirring the spoon in the pot, my mind went back to him. Dylan, with his intense gaze and nonchalant way of approaching me, seemed to have taken me out of my rhythm of life. Most uncomfortable of all was the realization that I was somehow unwilling to stop it. I knew that he had been visiting me often, and I, even without admitting it, had been waiting for these visits, wishing that he would show up at the door. The sound of the doorbell interrupted me once again. I knew who it was before I even looked at the security camera. I slowly got up and walked to the door. When I opened it, Dylan was there again. He didn't seem the least bit surprised that I was alone. "Hi, Callie," he said with that quiet smile, as if he had a right to be there. His hair was messier than last time, and he was wearing a dark leather jacket, which somehow matched the slight tension I felt. "Hi, Dylan," I replied with a weak smile, trying to hide the whirlwind of emotions running through me. "What brings you here again?" He shrugged, as if it were an obvious question. "Nathan texted me that he was going to be late, so I thought I'd spend some time with you. How are you?" The question was casual, but there was something behind it. Something that made me feel that he was more interested in knowing about me than anything else. I remained silent for a few seconds, trying to decide whether to be frank or just go with a superficial answer. But something in Dylan's simplicity, in his easy manner, disarmed me. Actually, I took a deep breath. Work, home, routine. No big deal. I made room for him to enter, and this time, unlike the other visits, I felt a pressure in my chest. What did he want from me? I didn't know, but I didn't care so much anymore. What mattered was that he was here again, and I was somehow wishing that he was. We settled down on the sofa in the living room, the soft morning light illuminating the room. The TV was off. The sound of silence filled the space as we chatted about trivialities. Time seemed to stretch, and suddenly our words became heavier, more charged. Dylan looked at me in a different way, and it didn't go unnoticed. His eyes seemed more attentive, and he seemed to measure every word I said, as if he was discovering something in me. He leaned forward a little more, his shoulders relaxed, but his eyes fixed on me in an almost disconcerting way. "Callie, you're an incredible woman, you know that?" he said suddenly, and I felt a sudden warmth invade my body. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, and it disconcerted me. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. He was looking at me in a way that made me feel exposed, vulnerable. I laughed nervously, trying to turn that moment into something lighter, more superficial. I don't know if I'm that incredible. I'm just a woman who works hard and tries to keep her head on straight. I tried to make fun, but my voice came out lower than I would have liked. But Dylan didn't laugh. He continued to stare at me with the same intensity, as if he had seen something in me that I hadn't noticed myself. "I think you're much more than that, Callie. You're a wonderful woman," he said. And his words settled on me, creating a space in which tension built up by the second. I didn't know what to say, but the intensity of that moment made me feel like I was finally being seen. I remained silent, feeling the weight of his words. I didn't know how to react to it. I didn't know how to deal with the fact that Dylan saw me in such a different way. He wasn't just talking about my work, about the woman I was in the business world. He was talking about me. The room fell silent, and the sound of the wind outside seemed to intensify. My heart was beating faster, and the feeling of being on the brink of something dangerous was growing stronger. Dylan didn't move away, but he didn't seem to force anything either. He was just standing there, waiting for a reaction. That's when he slowly got up and walked over to the window. I watched him in silence. The sunlight, filtered through the curtains, made his profile even more attractive. He turned to me, and for the first time, he didn't seem in any hurry to leave. "I don't know what you're thinking right now, Callie, but maybe you should stop trying to ignore what's happening between us." He spoke in the same soft voice, but now there was a tone of defiance. He wanted something, and I knew it. He wanted me to see, to accept what was being said without further question. I took a deep breath. The tension between us was at its limit, and I knew that nothing would be the same after that moment. "I don't know if I can do it, Dylan," I replied, my voice breaking, but deep down, I knew that if I was going to continue with this, I would have to break the rules that I had always held so tightly in my life. Dylan looked at me with a slightly crooked smile, as if he knew the truth before I even said it. The conversation went on for a while longer, but deep down, all I could think was, I had already passed the point of no return. The weekend passed with an uncomfortable slowness. The rain outside seemed like a metaphor for the maelstrom inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about Dylan, and every time he appeared, a new piece of me broke off. I knew I was in a delicate situation, that any wrong move could change everything. But at the same time, a part of me was curious, wanting to understand how far this bond between us could go. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was at home, trying to concentrate on work while my son went to the amusement park. But my mind wouldn't obey me. Every time I tried to focus, Dylan's words came back. That softness in his voice, the way he looked at me, as if he saw me in a way no one else did. I was beginning to realize that something deep was brewing, something I could no longer ignore. The doorbell rang, and for a moment, my heart leapt. I knew who it was before I looked out of the window. Dylan. He was there, standing in the rain, with an expression that seemed more serious than at other times. Something was different about him, and I could feel the tension in the air before he even opened the door. "Hi, Callie," he said, his voice lower, almost hesitant, which was unusual for him. Minus I know it's raining, and you've probably got a lot on your plate, but I thought I'd stop by and chat for a while. I looked at him for a moment, trying to understand what he really wanted. But in truth, I knew what he wanted. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine anymore. Sure, Dylan. Come in. It's cold outside. I opened the door, giving in once again, not knowing what would happen next. He came in, and the sound of the rain in the background seemed louder now, as if it were a kind of backdrop to what was about to happen. I led him into the living room, and we sat down on the sofa, the room silent except for the sounds outside. I could feel the tension in the air, a tension that wasn't new, but was becoming more palpable by the minute. Dylan didn't seem rushed, and that disconcerted me even more. "How are you?" he asked. But there was something in the tone of his voice that indicated that the question wasn't just about my day. It was something deeper, as if he was looking for an answer I didn't yet know how to give. I smiled, trying to disguise the inner turmoil. Well, Dylan, working and trying to keep the routine. You know how it is." He nodded, but didn't seem satisfied with my answer. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on mine. "No, I don't know what it's like. I see you, Callie. I see how you put yourself out into the world, how you take care of everything and everyone around you. But I also see that there's something you're holding on to, something that's trapped inside you, and I don't know if you're willing to let it go." He spoke with a softness that touched me deeply, and for a moment, I felt as if I was being seen in a way that I had never allowed before. Silence fell between us. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to talk about what he was suggesting. I didn't want to admit what was happening, but at the same time, a part of me felt that he was right. There was something inside me, something I wasn't willing to face, something to do with him. The way he looked at me, the way he made me feel alive, even if it was in a confusing way. "Dylan," I began, my voice shaking, not knowing how to continue. "This isn't simple. You're my son's friend. I'm older. We have our lives, our responsibilities." He looked at me with the same intensity, and his response was calm, but charged with a truth that seemed to cut through the distance between us. "I know, Callie. I know all that, but the truth is, as much as I want to make this work, things aren't controllable when you feel this way. When you feel that connection, you can't just ignore it. You can't hide what's happening here," he said, pointing between us, the gesture clear and direct. I felt the weight of those words, but I also knew he was right. I looked at him, speechless, feeling a mixture of fear and desire. I didn't want this, I told myself. I shouldn't feel it. But the truth was that I was already feeling it. I didn't know what that meant, but I couldn't deny it any longer. "Dylan, I don't know if I should allow this. I've been through so much. I don't know if I can allow myself to feel anything more for someone," I said, my voice low, almost in a whisper, trying to hold back what was starting to break inside me. He was silent for a moment, and then moved a little closer, without pressing. His presence was constant, calm, as if he knew that I needed time to understand. But he also knew that, at that moment, something was being decided. "I'm not going to pressure you, Callie. I'm not going to do anything you don't want. Just let me be a part of it, even if it's just for you to understand what's going on," he said, his voice soft, as if he were offering more than words. He was offering understanding, patience. I took a deep breath. His closeness made me feel as if time had slowed down, and at the same time, my heart raced. He wasn't asking for more than I could give at that moment. But even so, the feeling of being on the edge of something unknown put me on alert. Minus I don't know what's going to happen, Dylan, but I know you're right. I can't pretend I don't feel anything anymore, I said, the words escaping without my being able to control them. Dylan smiled softly, as if he had been waiting for that answer, as if he was sure that, eventually, I would say it. He moved away a little, but he was still close enough for me to feel his presence, the warmth of his body still so close to me. "I don't want to force anything, Callie. I just want you to know that I'm here, ready to wait until you understand what that means." He spoke with a sincerity that left me speechless. The silence between us stretched on, But now it was different. It was no longer uncomfortable, but charged with an unspoken promise, something I still didn't know how to define. But one thing was clear: something had changed. I didn't know what the future held, but there was no turning back. But in a flash, I was there, in my bed with Dylan by my side. There was no way I could hold back my feelings. Today I live this secret from my son. Do you think I should open up to him? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel.